Pleased to be joined by Mike Johnston from the Portland Winterhawks. Mike, as we speak right now, it's a week from opening night in the WHL. Tell me a bit about what the last days and weeks have been like for your group as everybody gets up to speed and gets back in rhythm here ahead of the start of a new season.
Well, it's always exciting. I'm sure most teams would say heading into training camp because you have a combination of things where you have the veteran players coming back. You want to see how they've elevated their game over the summer and their training. Then you have some of the young kids you've drafted. And then we always have about 25, 30 invites to training camp. We compete for the Neely Cup. It was a very competitive tournament. It was a situation where we found a couple of guys in that group that were invites. And so for those players out there that sometimes slip through the draft, they don't get drafted, they wonder what's going to happen to them. There's always opportunity, as you saw from listing around the league. Several teams found players in training camp that were invites. So it's really three levels. How do your veterans look? What about your draft picks? Are they ready to play or not ready to play right now? And then the tryout players, see if there's anybody on that in that group that you feel like listening.
Let's talk about your veterans first of all, Mike. The word that kind of jumps out to me maybe is balance with respect to all three kind of phases: forwards, defense, goaltending. When you look at your returning players, I know a bunch of them are off at NHL camps as we speak right now, but I mean, just in a general sense, how happy are you and your staff as an organization with the guys you have coming back, and just maybe excited as well for what might lie ahead for them here in the coming season?
Well, when we looked at our group at the trade deadline last year, we had to make some decisions. I think every team, every GM's faced with that when it comes to the trade deadline. Are we going to add for this year? How do we look for the next couple of years? And we really looked at our group and we thought there was a good possibility we could have some options for 20-year-olds, which we don't often have. Last year, we only had two 20-year-olds. We didn't even have three. And this year, it looked like we could have four or five coming back. And then, secondly, how was the depth of our group? Were we going to be a contender this year? So we made the decision last year, acquiring Chaz Lucius from the Winnipeg Jets, that we weren't going to do anything at the trade deadline. We were just going to wait, play it out for the year. We thought we had a really competitive team. Adding Chaz would have helped us get to another level, which it did for a short period of time until he got injured. And our group, I thought in the playoffs were really competitive, but it set the table for this year where we feel like we're returning a fairly veteran squad. We do have depth. We may not have the high-end talent that some teams in our league have or even in our division have, but we're top to bottom. I like the strength of our team.
You also went out and made a move. You talked about the 20-year-olds and had to make what I'm sure was a tough decision with Ryan McCleary, right? The deal with Swift Current, but you had an NHL prospect in Josh Davies via trade. How is Josh and, by extension, Tyson Yaremko, who you also acquired in that deal, how have they settled into life with the Winterhawks?
Just starting with Ryan McCleary, he did a great job for us over the last 3 years. He really developed his game. Obviously, was a draft pick, unsigned, but he's at an NHL camp right now. I like Ryan as a player, but we knew we were going to have to make a tough decision because we had four players with Clausen, O'Brien, Stefan, three forwards, and Ryan that could return as 20-year-olds. And every GM would take that, but it becomes a tough decision when you have to move one of the guys that have been with you for 4 or 5 years. So allowing Ryan to go back home and play with a very good team was something I thought that was great for him. And then we got Josh Davies in return. Josh is the type of player we felt that we may have needed last year in the playoffs. An energy guy, a guy who could skate, play our up-tempo game, physical, gritty, playoff type performer. So that's why we acquired him. He'll fit in nicely with our forward group.
Jan Spunar is with the Habs right now at training camp with Montreal, but he kind of really took the reins in the playoffs for your guys last year and comes back as a second-year import player for your group. What makes Jan such a special goaltender, and how excited are you to see where his game goes this season?
I thought both him and Dante played well in the first half last year. They were almost even. And then in the second half, I really thought Jan, his game started to elevate. And the thing I like about his game, probably two things. One, he is competitive, but he's calm and he's poised. And then the second thing is I found that if he had a tough night in goal, which every goaltender is going to have, he was able to rebound right away. So it seemed like things slid off as far as not carrying anything with them, whether it's a bad goal and it carries from one period to the other, or a game which he didn't really like and it goes from game to game. He's able to break that rhythm. I thought his consistency was really good. He played well in the playoffs, and certainly against Kamloops, we were a little bit outmatched, but I thought he held us in there for sure in two of the four games.
You had two defensemen drafted at the NHL draft this year, and Luca Cagnoni and Carter Sutherland, both of whom, we've gotten to know through conversations and at the Top Prospects game with Luca as well. You returned now three NHL drafted defensemen with Marek Alsher also a part of that group. But from an organizational standpoint, how neat was it to see those two guys that have kind of developed such a close bond both enjoy that day, in Nashville in late June?
Yeah, that was really exciting. Luca was there, so it was a great opportunity for our staff to be there with Luca and his family and see him get drafted, and especially a player who was undrafted in the Western Hockey League to see how he's taken his game to a high level. He's a special player. From my perspective, he has hockey sense, he has vision, great skating skills. He can be a game breaker. And I know at 19, he's going to be a guy who will be tough to handle night in and night out. And then for Carter Southern, a little bit of the opposite. I think Carter has a huge upside to his game. And Philly agrees with that as well, because I think Philly looks at him. He's just developing. He took a big role for us last year, but as a bigger defenseman, he could be kind of a blend of a up-tempo guy, but a guy who's good defensively in his own zone. So it was great for those two guys. And then Marek Alsher, I thought really rounded his game off last year, added more offense to his game. He's a big, solid defensive defenseman, but he can skate. So we like our back end. Those three guys will be core guys back there with Ryder Thompson and Josh Morey.
My last one for you, Mike, is about Gabe Clausen, and he took over as captain. Earned the captaincy from Tyson Kozak, who of course went pro last year in the Sabres organization. But if you could just maybe speak to Gabe's leadership qualities. I mean, we've seen what he can do on the ice, but what makes him kind of a leader in your room, and how do players and in that group kind of look up to him, when it comes to guidance and leadership over the course of a season?
Well, when we select our leaders, the way we do it is we get input from the players as coaches, because I view the leader as our contact to the team. So the team has to feel comfortable coming to that player to the coaching staff in return going back to that player to the team. So there has to be good communication lines. But it's really interesting when you look at players come into the organization, you can see those traits in a player when they're young. I find kids coming into our group at 16, 17, we recognize at that age that those guys could be future leaders for us. So we knew that right away with Gabe. We've got a good leadership group here, but Gabe's the type of guy he doesn't get rattled. Nothing really bothers him. He's very consistent in the way he plays the game. He can play both sides of the puck, so he's not a one-dimensional player. And I believe he really has the best interests of the whole team in mind. And that's probably one of the most important things for a leader is they care for the group and they want what's best for everybody. Because in our league, no matter what's happening, everybody always has, well, a little bit of what's good for them. Gabe's never done that. Right from day one, he's shown those characteristics, and he's a solid leader for us right now.